Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about the One Nation, One Ration Card scheme and the Supreme Court's order that it should be implemented in all states by the end of July. We also take a quick look at the efficacy of Covaxin and the extent to which it has been used in India's vaccination drive. But to begin with, we talk about the first set of stimulus measures that were announced to mitigate the economic impact of the second COVID-19 wave. These measures were announced by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on Monday. And one of the main things that they focused on was credit. Some of the biggest measures are essentially supposed to make it easier for people to take loans. In this segment, Udit Misra, who writes on economy for the Indian Express, joins us to talk about these measures, the extent to which they are supposed to help, and what economists have to say about it. Udit, one of the things that were announced by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman as part of the stimulus plan was the expansion of the scope of the Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme for small and medium firms. And what it said was that it was expanding it from 3 lakh crore rupees to 4.5 lakh crore rupees. So could you talk a bit about this scheme and the extent to which it has helped firms in the past?
So it's difficult to exactly gauge how much has it helped, but we have some numbers. We have an understanding from the finance minister that of the 3 lakh crores that was initially promised, close to 2.6 lakh crores, that money has been taken, that loan has been taken. So presumably banks have seen applications for loan, have seen the credit worthiness of the people who are applying for loan and given those loans. And again, presumably that there's scope here for expansion, that the government has gone ahead and expanded this scheme. The idea here is that the government says to the banks that it will guarantee the return of these loans so that the banks do not hold back from extending loans that otherwise are required for the normal functioning of the economy. And the important thing with this particular scheme, which is for small and medium firms, is that these are firms which do not have a massive amount of saving that they can tide over a period of distress like it is right now. And now we've had more than a year of such distress where revenues have fallen and there's not enough money. But these firms also require, they can't just switch on and off. So they still require certain amount of working capital needs. They need to carry on with at least some amount of staff, some amount of minimum payments, and they need to keep staying in the business or even hoping to invest a bit to expand when the economy improves. So that is the purpose of this loan, to ensure that chain that got broken because of the disruption between banks not extending loans to MSME firms or MSME firms not having enough cash or revenues because of the disruption and not being able to invest, those bonds are repaired. And that is the purpose of this scheme.
Okay, so by extending the scheme, the idea is that more people will be able to take these loans. And now, apart from this, the other thing that was announced as part of the stimulus plan was the additional credit guarantee scheme, 50,000 crore rupees to ramp up health infrastructure beyond the 8 major metros and 60,000 crore rupees for other sectors impacted by COVID. How much is that expected to help?
So again, it depends on how soon and how effectively can this money be used to ramp up health infrastructure. I think on health, the government has tried both the things. One is on the front of allocating some money to boost up health provisioning, especially for childcare in the public healthcare sphere, and then also help private sector health providers, hospitals, to take loans. Again, the idea here is that we have obviously an increasing need for providing healthcare. I mean, this is a tacit understanding or acceptance that government doesn't have all the wherewithal to provide healthcare. So it's also helping the private sector to get the loans to expand capacity in terms of provisioning. Now, when we talk about efficacy of any such a scheme, it will really depend on whether the private sector expand in the areas where actual demand is, or does it expand in areas where it's actually needed, or it expands in other areas. So the government has tried to tweak it by focusing on non-metros or the top metros and go beyond that. But that part, we'll have to wait and see and how that pans out.
So in this plan, what they have really focused on is extending credit. making it easier for people to take loans. But are there any other measures that stand out for you in the stimulus plan?
So, the way it was structured, there were certain elements which were already sort of known or understood, like the free food grains being provided till November or the additional fertilizer subsidy. These things had been announced or known before the package was announced. There were obviously some issues like rural broadband connectivity. There was some allocation made similarly for pediatric care. And there were smaller schemes like waiving visa fee for the first 5 lakh tourists and many such schemes. But see, the net import of all this is that government is trying to figure out ways in which it doesn't have to directly spend right now, but mend some of the broken links that are there in the economy. Help providers, especially in the private sector, to come up to a level where they can service a market and have the funds for that. So it's tweaked many of these schemes. It has also tried to pitch in by extending schemes where it was taking care of the EPFO element for private sector. So wherever it can for smaller firms, it is pitching to spend the EPF component for private firms. So it's trying to do as intricately as it can without spending a whole lot in the one go, see whether there are interesting ways, innovative ways of mending those broken ties.
I mean, what this essentially means is that there is not enough direct stimulus, right?
Yes. So, there are two elements to this, whether how much of it is actual expenditure by the government and how much of that is part of the government's contingent liabilities. Now, there is actual expenditure. Yes, it is less. But in terms of when the government says these are credit guarantees, you have to understand that what basically the government is doing is that it's telling banks that if tomorrow these firms or these individuals do not pay back, then the government will sort of make up for that loss.
But I'm guessing this whole thing depends on first people borrowing, banks lending, and then when they are not being able to return the money, then the government steps in and actually has to spend.
True, that is true. So that's a conscious choice that the government has done. Instead of directly spending, letting the economy, the assessment here is that the economy would have functioned fine or would have normally recovered, and the government can pitch in its role as providing the trust in the system and ensuring that in good faith people will function, and if the economy recovers and they are able to repay the whole loan, they'll be able to repay everything and government will not take anything on its books. But we must not forget that if people do not repay or these loans go bad, then the government will have to make good on all those loans.
So the finance minister pegged the financial impact of these measures at around 6.3 lakh crore, though we understand that this included things that were previously announced as well. But just talking about direct stimulus, how much of this amount is expected to be spent on that?
I think from various numbers that are available, the actual direct spending by the government in the immediate phase is, I don't think it's more than 50,000 crores. But again, the point is that the burden, the so-called contingent liabilities on the government are significantly go up.
Also, on the face of it, it always seems that direct stimulus, providing cash, is just a more easier way to boost the economy. You hand people money, that's when they know that they can spend it, they don't have to go into their savings, and that's what can actually help kickstart the economy. But can the government actually afford to do that at this point?
Yes, exactly. So, there are two things in this. One is that whether the government or governments in India have the technical wherewithal to actually give money directly to people and to all the kinds of people that they want to give it to, because right now it's affecting just about everybody. The other is whether the governments have the capacity to do that and in terms of financial ability to do that. What maybe US government or some of the Western governments in Western Europe have done is that they have had more ability and they've had better wherewithal to actually transfer that money. And there can be a question asked on why can't India actually spend more or also raise the fiscal deficit. There can also be a question asked on why is our fiscal deficit so high? Because we started giving, our fiscal deficit has also increased because we've taken off the corporate tax. In 2019, we reduced the corporate tax and roughly it's around 2 lakh crores every year. So the corporate world is actually doing very well. Companies are really doing well in terms of making profits. So one argument could be that, you go back on the corporate tax or tax the rich in the country through direct income tax or some other kind of tax or cess or surcharge, and raise that money to give money directly to the poor. So there is an open debate here on how much can Indian government spend and whether it has the wherewithal to spend or not. Because again, those Aadhaar and privacy issues come up when we starting to give the money.
So, when you speak to experts and economists, what are some of the measures that they say the government should consider?
So, I think the world of experts is quite frankly divided between these two views. One view is that what the government is doing is absolutely spot on. It's trying to boost supply, it's looking at more medium to long term impact. And by creating a lower tax regime, it is incentivizing future business investments in the country. And that is the way forward for us. And that if India continues to have such small businesses in the informal sector, that is not the way for sustainable growth. And all of this will lead to a sustainable model of growth for India. The other view, obviously, is very different, which says that this will not lead to any growth. We are just accumulating a lot of losses, a lot of loans which will not be paid back. And in the intervening time, people will suffer a lot because they would not have had the money, direct money that they could have had, and that the government is priorities are warped, that it's actually focusing more on giving relief to the rich than giving relief to the poor and disadvantaged. And all data shows that there has been a massive spike in inequalities. So actually, there is no one set of consensus opinion. There are many who believe that what the government is doing and that approach is the right thing for India to do in the medium term. Obviously, in the short term, that may still have some issues, but in the medium term, that will take us out of this crisis and put us on the right path of growth. Others obviously totally disagree with it.
And next, we talk about the One Nation, One Ration Card scheme. On Tuesday, the Supreme Court set a deadline for all the states. It said that by the 31st of July, states should implement the One Nation, One Ration Card system. Last year, the court had taken up a suo motu case related to the welfare of migrant workers who had suffered during the pandemic. And this verdict, this setting up a deadline, was part of that case. While setting the deadline, the court said that One Nation, One Ration Card was an important citizen-centric reform. In this segment, Indian Express's Parthasarthi Biswas joins us to talk about this scheme, how it helps migrant workers, and despite being in operation, it has not really taken off. Parthasarthi, could you first explain what exactly is the One Nation, One Ration Card scheme?
One Nation, One Ration Card scheme is embedded in the welfare state scheme of things. Ration, our public distribution system, as we know, is to ensure that no one goes hungry. As per the National Food Security Act of 2013, every state provides almost free or food grains at a very subsidized rate to people below a certain level of income. Now, One Nation, One Ration Card is taking it one step ahead and allowing a single ration card to be used across the country. Normally, what happens is that when you are staying in a certain area, for example, if you are staying in, say, Beed district of Maharashtra, your rationing officer is going to issue your ration card. The ration card is going to have all the names of all the beneficiaries, which would be your family members, and the entitlement of the family to free ration card. So per person, you have certain amount of rice and wheat given to the per family per ration card, and per the ration card would have, say, 4 or 5 members, and that would be the entitlement of the family. However, if you say were to travel from Beed to Kolhapur, which happens a lot because Beed is the seat of migration in Maharashtra, or say if you want to go out of Maharashtra to Karnataka, that ration card would not be valid. If you are going for a longer period of time, say for 2 years, 3 years, then you would have to go for a new ration card. You have to get your name delisted from the Beed circle and then get it transferred along with the necessary documents to the new circle you are moving to. One Nation, One Ration Card tries to bring about portability in ration card. For example, it is going to make the ration card like a mobile phone. You don't have to change your mobile phone numbers. If you are going from circle to circle, you can just port it. So the idea is the single ration card is going to be valid for across the nation, and the needy family and or the family who is entitled to drawing ration would be able to use the single ration card to draw ration across the world, across the nation, from all the fair price shops.
Okay, so according to the system, if a person from Maharashtra is going to Karnataka, they can still get grains through the system when they are in Karnataka. But what happens if, let's say, the migrant worker's family, they decide to stay back in Maharashtra? Can they still get rice and wheat that they are entitled to?
That is something that has to be worked out, because one ration card would have the names of all the family members. So if the family is traveling lock, stock and barrel, then the whole family can draw the ration from anywhere they are through this one ration card. But if the bread earner only is traveling and the family is remaining behind, so that kind of system has to be worked out to see how the family who is in Bid can draw the ration, while the man who has migrated to Karnataka can also draw his share of nation. That has yet to be worked out.
Okay, so right now we are saying that this is still a much better way of accessing the public distribution system than what we have right now. So could you just explain how this system is supposed to function on the ground?
So on the ground, the technology is the savior as usual, and it works on 2-3 different systems. So one nation, one ration card system is based on technology that involves details of the ration card, the Aadhaar number and electronic point of sale. So if the ration card holder goes to a fair price shop, he or she identifies himself or herself through the biometric authentication on the e-point of sale machines, which is matched real time with the details on the Anna Vitaran system of the public distribution system. Once the ration card details are verified, the dealer handouts the beneficiary the entitlements. So for example, if say I as a family was drawing 10 kgs of rice and say 12 kgs of wheat in Bid, and I travel with this ration card which has been made into a one nation, one ration card system, and I travel to say Madurai and I go to the fair price shop there, the fair price shop dealer would authenticate my biometric using the e-point of sales. The details would be captured and authenticated with the Anna Vitaran's website, which holds all relevant data. And as soon as the green signal is given, the entitlement, or at least 10 kgs of rice and 12 kgs of wheat, will be given to me in Madurai. All these things will be happening on real time, so there won't be any lag. So if I am a migrant family, that would help me. If I come from a migrant family, this system would ensure that I don't have to move around looking for grains. I would not have to go hungry ever.
Okay, so we understand that the One Nation, One Ration Card scheme is in operation in 32 states and the Union Territories, but it hasn't really taken off. Like, we know that about 69 crore people are supposed to benefit from this. But in June, only 1.65 lakh availed this scheme. So what are the reasons behind this? Why hasn't it taken off?
This scheme was launched in August 2019, but in reality, the work itself had started in a year back, that is in April 2018. The idea was to reform the public distribution system, which historically has been marked by inefficiencies and leakages. So it was at first launched initially as an interstate pilot, but when COVID-19 pandemic hit and thousands and lakhs of migrant workers were returning to their villages, this was felt that this need to be expedited, or the rollout was to be expedited. The central government, if you remember, had announced that the national rollout of One Nation, One Ration Card in all states and union territories by March 2021. Till date, 32 states and union territories have joined this scheme, covering around 69 crore national food security beneficiary. 4 states are yet to join the scheme. They would be Assam, Chhattisgarh, Delhi and West Bengal. Around 1.35 crore portability transactions every month are being recorded under this scheme. A total of more than 27.83 crore portability transactions have taken place across the states and union territories since the inception of the scheme in 2019, out of which 19.8 crores portability transactions have been recorded during the COVID period. The ministry had issued a press release regarding this. While this is a very good scheme and it has to take up, there are obviously lacunas. The lacunas would be the ground level inadequacies of the public distribution system of the state. Though the National Food Security Mission is a central scheme, it is implemented by the states through their public distribution systems. Now these systems, the fair price shops or the Ration Ka Dukan, they have got their inadequacies. At times they don't have the EPOS machines, or the state government has not mapped them properly. The rationing system itself has its own lacunae about. There are talks about people who have died or people who are not existing. Their names are there on the rationing system. So all these things are there which has to be identified. Now at their level, the central government has done a good job about digitalizing data. Both the data of the public distribution system and Anna Vitaran have been digitalized. They are online. What needs to be done is to authenticate the ration card with Aadhaar, that is Aadhaar seeding. And once the Aadhaar seeding is done, the e-POS machines would be using the Aadhaar seeded ration card, would be scanning the Aadhaar seeded ration cards and verifying the data with the central government's data bank and then distributing the entitlements.
Are there schemes like this that have been tried before based on which we can say that this could also potentially work well?
So a similar scheme has been run about in the fertilizer sector, where Aadhaar of farmers have been captured to ensure that subsidized fertilizer does not go to the wrong hands. The same thing, but that did involve a lot of work about distribution of e-POS machines and other things, but that is running quite well. And this is not a very difficult task because technology is everywhere now. Even the remotest of village would have an e-POS, would have network necessary for the e-POS machines to work. So what needs to be done is to ensure that training of the fair price shop dealers be taken and e-POS machines be given. Aadhaar seeding of ration card, I think, has progressed a real deal, so that might not be a problem anymore.
And Parthasarthi, could you just talk a bit about what would this mean to migrant workers if, in fact, it is implemented properly?
Well, this is going to be a great boon for the migrant workers because the whole idea of food security mission is to ensure that the needy don't go hungry. So in case if you are able to get your ration in the village, but you're not going to get the ration where you're working, that defeats the whole scheme of things. So this scheme has to be taken up at a war footing, and if this is implemented across the country, which can be done if we have the political will and the administrative power behind it, then it would ensure that the National Food Security Mission does not remain on paper, and it really adapts to the times that where migration is a reality for many people.
And in the end, we talk about Covaxin. Yesterday, the National Institutes of Health in the US said that Covaxin, which is the vaccine developed by Bharat Biotech, is effective against both alpha and delta variants of coronavirus. This information reinforces what a recent study conducted by scientists at the Indian Council of Medical Research and National Institute of Virology had found. But despite its efficacy, how many Covaxin doses has India utilized in its vaccination drive? In his piece, Indian Express's Leela Prasad points out that as of June 30th, only 12% of the total doses administered were that of Covaxin. This is according to the centre's CoWIN dashboard. The majority of the doses, of course, have been that of Covishield, followed by Sputnik V. He also points out that besides Assam and Tripura, not a single dose of Covaxin has reached the northeastern states of Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Manipur, Meghalaya, and Mizoram so far. Prasad writes that the slower rollout of the Bharat Biotech's Covaxin in comparison with the Serum Institute manufactured Covishield is most likely due to the production capacities of the two vaccine makers. In April, when Bharat Biotech was under fire for the delayed availability of Covaxin, it had said that it takes approximately 120 days to finish manufacturing, testing, and releasing one batch of vaccine. Though its production is expected to increase. The government has said that it expects to increase the production of Covaxin to 135 million doses a month by November from 30 million doses in May. You were listening to Three Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.